The Los Angeles Dodgers and the Philadelphia Phillies have played some of the most intense and memorable games in recent Major League Baseball history. But nothing that has come before could have prepared anyone inside that stadium, watching on television, or following along on social media for what erupted during the third inning of their most recent matchup. What began as a competitive and hard-fought baseball game transformed in a matter of seconds into one of the most chaotic, emotional, and widely discussed brawls the sport has seen in years. At the center of it all was Shohei Ohtani, the most celebrated and beloved player in all of baseball, who was on the receiving end of a piece of dirty play so deliberate and so dangerous that it immediately ignited a firestorm that consumed the entire stadium and sent shockwaves across the baseball world. The brawl that followed was massive, ugly, and completely unavoidable given what had just been done to the Dodgers' biggest star. And the questions being asked in the hours and days since have been urgent, angry, and impossible to ignore. What exactly did the Phillies player do to Ohtani? How badly was the Japanese superstar hurt? What happened when the benches cleared and the third inning descended into absolute chaos? And what does MLB plan to do about a situation that has outraged the entire sport? When the Dodgers and Phillies took the field for this matchup, the competitive intensity was already at an elevated level that both sets of fans and media personnel had come to expect from these two teams. There was history between them, there was pride on both sides, and there was the unmistakable electricity that comes when two genuinely talented rosters go head-to-head with something meaningful at stake. Shohei Ohtani, as always, was the player that everyone in the stadium had come to see. Every time he stepped to the plate, every time he moved on the base paths, the attention of the entire building shifted entirely to him. He carries that kind of gravity wherever he goes, and on this particular night, that gravity was about to place him directly in the path of something that nobody in that stadium could have anticipated or excused. The first two innings of the game had been tense but controlled. Both teams were playing hard, the pitching was sharp on both sides, and the crowd was engaged and energized by a game that felt like it carried genuine weight. But beneath the surface of what appeared to be a competitive and professional baseball game, something was building. Sources within the Dodgers clubhouse revealed after the game that players had noticed unusual aggression and deliberate physicality from certain Phillies players even in those early innings. Mookie Betts said after the game that he had picked up on something that felt off during the first couple of innings, a pattern of behavior from one particular Phillies player that seemed to go beyond normal competitive edge and into something more calculated and more troubling. At the time, the Dodgers responded by staying focused and professional, trusting that the game would be played within the boundaries that professional baseball demands. That trust would prove to be badly misplaced. The third inning arrived and with it came the moment that changed everything. Shohei Ohtani was involved in a play that gave the Phillies player in question a direct physical opportunity, and what that player chose to do with that opportunity was something that crossed every line that exists in professional baseball. The dirty play was not subtle. It was not ambiguous. It was not the kind of incident that requires slow-motion replay and expert analysis to understand. Everyone in that stadium saw it in real time. Everyone watching on television saw it in real time. And every single person who witnessed it understood immediately and completely what had just been done to Ohtani and why it was done. The Phillies player had targeted the most important player on the Dodgers roster with a piece of play so reckless and so deliberate that it left Ohtani visibly hurt and the entire Dodgers team absolutely furious. Ohtani went down, and for a terrifying moment, the stadium fell into the kind of silence that only descends when something genuinely serious has happened on a baseball field. Players stopped moving. Fans stopped cheering. The broadcasters fell momentarily quiet. All eyes were locked on Shohei Ohtani, the player that millions of people around the world had come to love and admire, lying on the field after being on the receiving end of something that had no place in professional sport. The Dodgers medical staff rushed onto the field immediately. Dave Roberts was out of the dugout before anyone else, sprinting toward his star player with an expression on his face that combined raw fear with barely controlled fury. The seconds that followed felt like an eternity to every single person in that stadium as everyone waited to understand the full extent of what had just happened to Ohtani. Those seconds of tense silence ended in an explosion. The moment it became clear that Ohtani had been deliberately and recklessly targeted, the Dodgers' dugout emptied with a speed and a collective anger that sent an unmistakable message to every single person on that field. Freddie Freeman was among the first out of the dugout, moving with a purpose and intensity that made his feelings immediately clear. Mookie Betts followed right behind him. Within seconds, players from both teams were on the field, and what unfolded over the next several minutes was the kind of massive, chaotic brawl that baseball has rarely seen at this level of intensity and emotion. Pushing, shouting, grabbing, and confrontations broke out across multiple areas of the field simultaneously. The umpiring crew was completely overwhelmed by the scale of what was happening around them. Security personnel rushed onto the field from every available entrance. Coaches and managers were physically inserting themselves between players in an attempt to prevent the situation from escalating even further than it already had. Dave Roberts found himself at the absolute center of the chaos, and the Dodgers manager handled the moment with a combination of fierce protectiveness toward his players and a clear-eyed understanding that he needed to be the voice of authority and control in a situation that was threatening to spiral completely out of hand. Roberts was seen moving between players, pulling teammates back, directing his coaching staff, and simultaneously making sure that the umpiring crew understood in no uncertain terms what the Dodgers believed had just taken place and what they expected to happen in response. Those near the field during the brawl reported that Roberts was speaking with a controlled fury that was more powerful and more commanding than any shouting could have been. He was not out of control. He was absolutely in control, and he was making sure that everyone around him understood exactly how serious this situation was. After what felt like an eternity but was in reality several extremely intense minutes, order was slowly and painfully restored to the field. Multiple ejections were handed out by the umpiring crew, including the Phillies player whose dirty play had started everything. The player in question was removed from the game immediately, a decision that drew loud and sustained reaction from the crowd. Additional players from both sides who had been centrally involved in the confrontation were also ejected, and warnings were issued to both benches in language that made clear the umpires would tolerate absolutely nothing further from either side. The game eventually resumed, but the atmosphere inside the stadium had been permanently altered by what had taken place. This was no longer just a baseball game. It had become something much larger and much more significant. The most important question hanging over everything that followed was the condition of Shohei Ohtani. The Dodgers medical staff worked with him on the field and continued their assessment in the dugout and eventually in the clubhouse as the game went on around them. The anxiety that gripped every Dodgers fan watching was real and intense, because the thought of Ohtani being seriously hurt by a piece of deliberate dirty play was almost too painful to process. Dave Roberts provided an update to reporters during the game when he could, and his words offered some relief without completely eliminating the concern. He confirmed that Ohtani was being evaluated thoroughly and that the medical team was taking every precaution to fully understand the extent of any injury before making any decisions about his status going forward. Roberts said Ohtani was in discomfort but was characteristically trying to minimize the situation and push through, which Roberts said was both admirable and exactly the kind of thing that made it necessary for the medical staff to be extra careful and thorough in their assessment. After the final out was recorded, Dave Roberts walked into the post-game press conference with an energy that immediately silenced the room. Every reporter present understood that what they were about to hear was not going to be carefully managed public relations language designed to smooth over a difficult situation. Roberts looked directly at the assembled media and spoke with a directness and a conviction that left absolutely no room for misinterpretation. He said what the Phillies player had done to Shohei Ohtani was one of the most deliberately dangerous and completely unacceptable things he had ever seen on a professional baseball field in his entire career. He said the dirty play was obvious, it was intentional, and it was targeted at a player who had never done anything to deserve that kind of treatment from any opponent. Roberts confirmed that the Dodgers had already submitted a formal complaint to MLB with all available evidence and that the organization was demanding immediate, serious, and meaningful disciplinary action against the player responsible. Freddie Freeman addressed reporters with an emotional rawness that reflected exactly how the incident had affected every member of the Dodgers clubhouse. Freeman said that watching Ohtani go down after that dirty play was one of the most upsetting things he had experienced during his time in professional baseball. He said every player in the Dodgers dugout reacted the same way in that moment, with a combination of genuine fear for their teammate and absolute fury at what had been done to him. Freeman said the team's response, clearing the benches and standing up for Ohtani, was not something anyone debated or discussed. It was instinctive, immediate, and unanimous. He said that is what real teams do for each other, and that the Dodgers would always stand up for one of their own when the situation demanded it. Mookie Betts spoke quietly but with unmistakable intensity when he addressed the media after the game. He said the moment he saw Ohtani go down, every other thought left his mind. He said his only focus in that instant was getting to his teammate and making sure he was okay, and that the anger came rushing in immediately after the relief of seeing Ohtani conscious and responsive. Betts said the brawl that followed was not something anyone had planned or wanted, but that given what had just been done to Ohtani, it was completely understandable and he believed completely justified. He said the Dodgers are not a team that looks for trouble or that wants conflict with any opponent. But they are absolutely a team that will stand together and fight for each other when the situation demands nothing less. MLB responded to the incident with a speed that reflected the seriousness and the public visibility of what had occurred. The league confirmed that a full investigation had been immediately opened and that all footage, umpire reports, and statements from both organizations were being reviewed as a matter of urgent priority. Sources within the league office indicated that the evidence gathered so far painted a very clear picture of deliberate and dangerous conduct that warranted significant disciplinary consequences. The baseball community responded to the news of MLB's investigation with widespread calls for the kind of suspension and penalty that would send an unmistakable message to every player in the league about what happens when the safety and well-being of other players is deliberately and recklessly disregarded. As the night ended and the full weight of everything that had happened began to settle, the image that remained most powerfully in the minds of everyone who had witnessed this extraordinary and deeply troubling chapter of the MLB season was not the brawl, not the ejections, and not the chaos that had consumed the third inning. It was the image of Shohei Ohtani, hurt and shaken by something he had done absolutely nothing to deserve, conducting himself with the same quiet dignity and grace that has always defined him as a player and as a person. He did not retaliate. He did not seek to escalate. He trusted his teammates to stand up for him, trusted his manager to fight for him, and trusted the sport he loves to ultimately do the right thing. The baseball world was watching. And it was demanding that the right thing be done without delay. Thank you for watching. Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. Subscribe to our channel for more interesting and up-to-date information.